Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, October 11, 2024. In the presidential election, Republican nominee Donald Trump campaigns in Aurora, Colorado, which he says has been taken over by gangs from Venezuela. And Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Walz is in Macomb County, Michigan, talking about manufacturing jobs and Donald Trump's assessment that Detroit is a mess. One of the closest U.S. House races in the country is Maine's 2nd Congressional District. We will hear the debate between incumbent Democrat Jared Golden and Republican challenger Austin Theriault and talk about it with Lewiston Sun Journal reporter Steve Collins. President Joe Biden says the estimated cost of Hurricane Milton is $50 billion in damage, as he and Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, get a briefing at the White House on the federal response to both Milton and Hurricane Helene. And this year's Nobel Peace Prize is awarded to an organization from Japan working towards a world without nuclear weapons. Reuters has an article that previewed Donald Trump's speech today in Colorado that reads he will hold an immigration-focused rally on Friday in Aurora, a place the Republican presidential candidate has falsely depicted as a war zone overrun by Venezuelan gang members, even as local officials have denied the allegations and Venezuelans have expressed fear they are being scapegoated. Former President Trump has used the 400,000-person Denver suburb as a symbol of what he calls migrant crime that he says is a result of high levels of illegal immigration under Democratic President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, his main election rival. That was the article from Reuters. Today, Donald Trump announced a new operation regarding border security.
In honor of Jocelyn, Nungari, Lakin, Riley, beautiful Lakin, Rachel, Morin, and all of the others that are dead and or mortally wounded at the hands of migrants who should never have been allowed into our country, I'm announcing today that upon taking office, we will have an Operation Aurora at the federal level. To expedite the removals of these savage gangs, and I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Think of that. 1798. This was put there. 1798. That's a long time ago, right? To target and dismantle every migrant criminal network operating on American soil. Who would have ever thought that a president or a future president would ever have to stand here and say such things? Who would think that that's even possible to have to do? So many things are changed in the last 4 years, but that's the state of our country now after Kamala and Joe Biden have just absolutely destroyed our country. We're a country in tremendous distress. We're a failing country. We're laughed at all over the world. We will send elite squads of ICE, Border Patrol, and federal law enforcement officers to hunt down, arrest, and deport every last illegal alien gang member until there is not a single one left in this country. And if they come back into our country, they will be told it is an automatic 10-year sentence in jail with no possibility of parole. And I'm hereby calling for the death penalty for any migrant that kills an American citizen or a law enforcement officer. With your vote, we will achieve complete and total victory over these sadistic monsters. It's going to go very quickly. Remember our local police? They're great. I know them so well. They've been restricted from operating. They're great. They know everything about every one of them. They say, oh, how will you ever find them? The local police know everyone. They know their middle names. They know their serial numbers, where they live. No, and they want to do their job. They're done. You have no idea how many police officers say, sir, we're going to indemnify them against any prosecutions because they get prosecuted if they do their work. Going to pass that, it'll pass so fast. If they do their job, they get prosecuted by their own people. They get sued by the people that won't take care of the criminals. Some of the DAs that won't do the, think of it, and AGs They won't go after the criminal, but they'll go after our police officers if they do the job. We will take back our suburbs, we'll take back our cities and towns, and we will take back our country, and we will do it very, very quickly.
Donald Trump, former president and Republican presidential nominee in Aurora, Colorado today. The last Republican to win Colorado in a presidential election was George W. Bush in 2004. Donald Trump will be holding a campaign rally on Saturday in Coachella Valley, California, another currently blue state. The last Republican to win California was George H.W. Bush in 1988. But from a Newsweek article, President Trump's visit to Coachella will highlight Harris's poor record and show that he has the right solutions for every state and every American. Stephen Chung, spokesperson for the Trump campaign, told Newsweek. Story from the Washington Examiner. Governor Tim Walz, Democrat of Minnesota, blasted former President Donald Trump for his recent comments denigrating Detroit. While delivering remarks to the Detroit Economic Club on Thursday, Trump told the audience that the whole country will be like, you want to know the truth, it will be like Detroit. If Vice President Kamala Harris wins the election, our whole country will end up being like Detroit if she's your president. You're going to have a mess on your hands. Walz claimed that Trump's comments were not unexpected, joining a growing chorus of Democrats who attacked the former president for his remarks. That's the article from the Washington Examiner. Governor Walz, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, spoke in Michigan.
Just yesterday, Donald Trump was in Detroit, and he said, our whole country will end up being Detroit. You're going to have a mess on your hands. Well, look, I know you don't, that's not unexpected for him. That's exactly what he's going to do, tear down America. But if the guy would have ever spent any time in the Midwest, like all of us know, we'd know Detroit's experiencing an American comeback and renaissance. Look, I'm a Twins fan, and you whipped our ass. We know where this is. Detroit's there, so we know. City's growing, crime's down, factories are opening up. But those guys, all they know about manufacturing is manufacturing bull every time they show up. Every time they show up. Look, this guy has spent his life, Trump has spent his life talking a big game. But he has been an absolute disaster for working people. One of the biggest losers of manufacturing jobs of any American president in history. Under Donald Trump, we saw 280,000 Michigan jobs gone. 30,000 of those manufacturing jobs gone. Nearly 9,000 auto industry jobs gone. Trump's presidency was an endless string of broken promises. He actually came here to Warren when he first ran. And he promised you, under a Trump presidency, you won't lose a single plant. Technically, it wasn't a lie, because he lost 6 of them, not 1. So, as they fact-checked me, I got it right. They lost 6 of them. Look, he lost the GM transmission plant down the road. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. He promised to fight for union workers, repeatedly turned his back on him. He even encouraged automakers to move manufacturing out of Michigan and go to anti-union states so they could pay their workers less. There's the reason that the UAW members endorsed Kamala Harris, and your president and many of your members called him exactly what he was, a scab.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, speaking to auto workers today in Michigan. A Wall Street Journal article says that voters in the nation's 7 battleground states see Donald Trump as better equipped than Kamala Harris to handle the issues they care about most, the economy and border security, yet are divided about evenly over which candidate should lead the nation. A new Wall Street Journal poll finds. The survey of the most contested states finds Harris with slim leads in Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia on ballots that include independent and third-party candidates where they will be offered as options. Trump has a narrow edge in Nevada, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. But no lead is greater than 2 percentage points, except for Trump's 5-point advantage in Nevada, which, like the others, is within the poll's margin of error. That was from the Wall Street Journal. 2 former Democratic presidents are starting to hold rallies for the Harris-Walz ticket. Barack Obama began last night in Pittsburgh and will be in Tucson, Arizona, and Las Vegas, Nevada next weekend. Bill Clinton will be in Georgia on Sunday and Monday, and then a bus tour in North Carolina next week. Here's a minute of Barack Obama's speech Thursday night in Pittsburgh.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. I've noticed this especially with some men who seem to think Trump's behavior, the bullying and the putting people down, is a sign of strength. And I am here to tell you that is not what real strength is. It never has been. Real strength is about working hard and carrying a heavy load without complaining. Real strength is about taking responsibility for your actions and telling the truth even when it's inconvenient. Real strength is about helping people who need it and standing up for those who can't always stand up for themselves. That is what we should want for our daughters and for our sons, and that is what I want to see in a president of the United States of America.
Former President Barack Obama in Pittsburgh Thursday night campaigning with Governor Josh Shapiro for Vice President Kamala Harris for president and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz for vice president. C-SPAN's Campaign 2024 coverage also includes gubernatorial, U.S. Senate, and U.S. House races. And when it comes to the U.S. House, especially the ones that are too close to call, according to the polls, the Cook Political Report rates 26 House races out of the 435 members as toss-ups. 12 currently held by Democrats, 14 by Republicans. And one of those seats is Maine's 2nd congressional district, where incumbent Democrat Jared Golden is facing Republican challenger State Representative Austin Theriault. In a couple of minutes, we'll speak to a reporter about this race. First, the debate between the candidates from Wednesday. One of the questions was about the state economy.
Much has been said about the lobster industry throughout this campaign, but far less has been shared about other fishing, farming, and forestry, which are other key staples of the 2nd District economy. What would you propose doing in the coming Congress to better ensure the sustainability of these key sectors in our state's economy? And Congressman Golden, it goes to you first.
Well, we've talked a lot about the lobster fishery because it's so important to Maine's economy. And same for our forest products industry, for logging, sawmills, paper mills, and obviously farming is huge everywhere in the 2nd District. Those 3 things are really the cornerstone of our economy. I'll hit again on the Inflation Reduction Act. That had a tax credit specifically for forest products. Timber HP, that's in Madison, Maine. That's a paper mill that closed in like 2015 or 16. They've reopened. Now they're making insulation out of wood fiber, and we got them a $16 million credit, tax credit, out of the Inflation Reduction Act. That's going to help them open up their 3rd and final product line. They're ultimately, because of that, going to ramp up to employing about 150 people. I've done things like supporting $1 million for Northern Maine Community College for the mechanized logging operations training program that you have up here. It's a great program. I've worked closely with the PLC, the professional logging contractors, to get them money when we had weather up here that caused their operations to go sideways and they were losing money hand over fist. We get them millions of dollars from the federal government to help offset their losses. So. On the farming side, certainly, I've actually tried to work closely with agencies like the USDA, small business development centers, and others to make sure that we're getting them resources that they need to hopefully, continue doing work the way that they want to do it and make smart investments in their farms.
Representative Theriault.
Well, this is personal for me. I come from a farming and logging family up in St. John Valley, and I know a lot of people here probably watching tonight have some sort of story of a grandparent or whatever that picked potatoes at one point in their lives. But here's the deal. The government creates bad economic climate, and then the government comes in to try to save the day. And that's exactly what Mr. Golden just talked about. So in particular with logging, the logging industry is really struggling right now because of high interest rates, because of out-of-control government spending. Let's look at the farming industry. I just was in a potato house this afternoon, and I asked the guy, I said, how do you store these potatoes? And he said, our energy costs have doubled, almost tripled. And that's what they're facing right now. They may be making a little bit more money at the market, but they're having such high costs that they're having to not be, they're not being able to buy new equipment and whatnot. And in terms of the lobster industry, this one is even more challenging. The federal government is coming after the fisheries, and particularly NOAA, the agency that has put a lot of regulations on the lobster industry, and also offshore wind, which is going to put the lobster industry out of business. Now, I've been against offshore wind pretty consistently. Jared Golden said he does not support offshore wind, but on several occasions he's supported additional subsidies and funding for offshore wind, and now the lobster industry is spending literally millions of dollars in lawsuits trying to fight back against what's going on. They know if the offshore wind terminals come to Maine, they're going to be decimated. And this is personal because it affects a lot of people that I know. And so in the Inflation Reduction Act, there's a lot of money that's spent on renewable energy, clean energy. Even Joe Biden said it had nothing to do with inflation. It was essentially a green energy bill. And NOAA's going after our fisheries. And so what I would like to do is I'd like to go to NOAA and say, we're not going to give you any more money unless we come to the table with all the stakeholders involved in these natural resource industries and find a long-term solution. Because I can promise you the people in D.C., like Harris and Biden and those that are running these agencies don't know better than the farmers, loggers, and lobstermen that are actually on the ground here at home. They've been doing it for decades and literally generations, and I trust them more.
Maine State Representative Austin Theriault, Republican candidate, debating Congressman Jared Golden, Democratic candidate, on Wednesday. Steve Collins, State House reporter for the Sun Journal in Maine, has been covering the 2nd Congressional District election and joins us now by phone. Thank you so much for being with us. This is one of the toss-up U.S. House races in the country. Is it close because of the candidates or the district?
The district, for sure. The 2nd District in Maine is this sprawling district. It's the largest one east of the Mississippi, and it's about the most rural one in the country. Just for example, I'm sitting at the Sun Journal's newsroom right now, and Lewiston, Maine, which is the biggest city in the district, and we have 38,000 people. It's like a city block in New York City. And so people live in very small places, and politics is pretty remote from what most of them think about every day. And it's a very independent-minded area. People are, they're community-spirited. They help each other out, but they also firmly believe in leaving each other alone. And so it doesn't really mesh very well with modern American politics.
What have been the major issues so far in this race?
Well, certainly Jared Golden, the incumbent Democrat, he's been pushing abortion as an issue. He's a very pro-choice Democrat, and Theriault he's kind of tried to avoid talking about it too much, but he argues that each state should decide for itself, and that is a pretty big issue. On the other hand, Theriault has been talking a lot about Jared Golden's what he calls flip-flopping on guns, because the incumbent Democrat has switched his position on guns. He came in as a rare Democrat who had NRA support, strong ratings from 2A groups, and after the mass shooting in Lewiston last fall, he came out and said he was sorry about his previous position and now favors some restrictions on people being able to get assault weapons. So that was a clear change of his policy on it. Theriault also says he's flip-flopped on a whole bunch of other issues that are a lot more questionable. Those have probably been the biggest things going in this race.
The two candidates have debated 3 times in the past week. What came out of those debates?
Ooh. I don't know that voters are a whole lot more enlightened than they were going on. They were both. So you kind of have to picture in Maine. It's one of the things that's really different is you turn on the TV for that debate, and Jared Golden's in a red flannel shirt, and Austin Theriault's wearing a blue blazer, no tie or anything. It's a very informal kind of place, and that's just how Maine is. And they there was no big major, like, gotcha moments or mean-spirited exchanges. I mean, they both just sort of laid out where they stand on things and gently prodded each other. I'm not sure that anyone's minds were changed too much, but it was a lot of debates in a very short time.
You mentioned it's a very large and rural district. What is campaigning like there? And because it's a toss-up race, are you seeing any outside money coming in to try to influence it?
Well, there's a ton of outside money. I don't know exactly how much is spent this time, but so Jared Golden this is the fourth time he's run. And in each of the other races, there were tens of millions of dollars spent on outside advertising. And super PACs and PACs are pouring money in part because it's really cheap to buy TV and radio time in Maine. And so they can fill up the airwaves pretty much constantly for months. So that's part of it. But so that's the campaign that most people see at their house. They don't really, you're unlikely to see the candidates themselves. You're just going to see the ads or hear them. But the candidates themselves have a lot of ground to cover. If you want to, just to try to like go to the fairs and shake hands and things like that, it's difficult because it's so big. And, to get from one end of the district to the other is a 4 or 5 hour car trip sometimes. And it's a big territory with not many people. Lots of trees, though.
Maine is one of 2 states that divides its electoral college vote in the presidential race by district as opposed to winner take all. Has that had an influence on the congressional race?
Well, to some degree it has, because Theriault has a strong endorsement from former President Trump, and Jared Golden, on the other hand, isn't even. He's been pressed to say who he's going to vote for in the race, and he won't even say that. He's clearly no great fan of Trump, but he's also not willing to say much of anything about Harris, and so that's kind of been an issue all the way through. Is that because that's the big stakes in the district, and Trump is probably going to win the district. He has every time he's been on the ballot, and so for Golden to get elected, he's going to have to run much stronger than Donald Trump does in this district, and so that's difficult. I mean, he's done it 3 times, so he certainly can do it, but from his point of view, the less you talk about the presidential race, probably the better. And from Theriault's point of view, the more we talk about Trump and how they're all connected, the more likely he is to win. So it does matter.
Steve Collins, State House reporter with the Sun Journal in Maine. You can find his articles at sunjournal.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
And this is Washington Today. Another U.S. House race rated as a toss-up by the Cook Political Report is Alaska's at-large seat. The incumbent, Congresswoman Mary Peltola, a Democrat, facing Nick Begich III, Alaska Policy Forum board member and the grandson of a former congressman. They debated Thursday night, Associated Press writing about it. Peltola won special and regular elections for the seat and became the first Alaska native in Congress. Begich, who has been endorsed in this race by former President Donald Trump, was among the opponents Peltola defeated in 2022. Peltola has tried to distance herself from presidential politics, declining to endorse Vice President Kamala Harris, while also saying she is not voting for Trump. During the debate, she said she doesn't see the world through a partisan lens and is focusing on her own race. She declined to say if she'd vote for Kamala Harris. That was from Associated Press. Here's part of the debate from Thursday night. One of the issues was housing costs.
So let's talk about Alaska's housing crisis. This question is for both of you. Between 2020 and 2023, the average price of a home in Alaska climbed more than 20%. What specific policies would you support to make housing more affordable in Alaska? You will have 1 minute. Congresswoman Peltola.
Well, one of the things I think that we need to make sure we're doing is keeping the federal government open. Many programs are available for veterans, for first-time homebuyers. We need to make sure that we don't have a closed federal government impeding those kinds of transfers. I think homelessness is a huge problem in Alaska, and we see it here in Anchorage. 40% of Alaska's homeless population are children. They did not do anything to deserve that, and we need to be working collaboratively at the federal, state, and local level to alleviate the homeless situation that we have right now. I think that we need to be looking at energy utilities and figuring out ways to streamline that. I think permitting is a huge problem. I think we need to have more land available from anyone who will partner, and make sure that we are providing low interest loans for future homeowners.
And Mr. Begich, you have 1 minute.
Well, I think here in Alaska, the issue is exacerbated by the fact that so much of our lands in this state are not in private hands. When I travel to places like Ketchikan, I can tell you that there is land available there if it will simply be unlocked from our federal government. And we need to do more to unlock the federal government lands that they hold currently in Alaska and make those available to people who would like to build homes. And look, I think we do have a challenge. We talk about the prices of homes being up 20%, but the interest rates exacerbate that. When you look at the home payment, the average home payment in Alaska, it's up over 100%. And that is a huge problem for first-time home buyers. I've met with many young people across Alaska who have said, look, I saved. I did everything right. I've got my money for a down payment, but now I can't afford the payment for the home once I put that down payment down. So it's important that we have lower interest rates in order to facilitate first-time home buyers.
And to follow up on that, how do you get those lower interest rates then?
Yeah, I think pressure has to be mounted on the Federal Reserve. What we saw was that their reaction, their response to a heated up economy was to raise interest rates. That's a classic response. But in this case, I don't think it was the appropriate one, because the root cause of the inflation that we've seen was excess money printing by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve went out in order to finance excess government debt. They printed money in order to do that, and that's a huge problem. They should have pulled some of that liquidity by selling some of the T-bill holdings that they had.
And Congresswoman Peltola, I want to give you 30 seconds to respond to that as well.
I think that the federal government provides many different categories of low-interest home loans, and we need to look at broadening those. I think that it's really important that we have interest rates that people can afford. I don't agree with the proposal to give first-time home buyers, a $25,000 check. I think that will exacerbate the problem. I think that we need to be looking more at interest rates.
Debate Thursday night between Congresswoman Mary Peltola, Democrat from Alaska, and her Republican opponent in the election next month, Nick Begich. Associated Press article about the race says Peltola and Begich are the most prominent candidates in the race, which also includes Alaskan Independence Party candidate John Wayne Howe and Eric Hafner, a Democrat with no apparent ties to the state who is serving a 20-year prison sentence for threatening authorities and others in New Jersey. The debate audience was told that only candidates who got at least 5% of the vote in the primary were invited to Thursday's debate. Neither Howe nor Hafner met that threshold. That was from Associated Press. You can find this debate, plus all of C-SPAN's Campaign 2024 coverage, House races, Senate races, the presidential election, governor's races, at our video library, cspan.org. Washington Today continues in a moment.
The House will be in order.
This year, C-SPAN celebrates 45 years of covering Congress like no other. Since 1979, we've been your primary source for Capitol Hill, providing balanced, unfiltered coverage of government, taking you to where the policy is debated and decided, all with the support of America's cable companies. C-SPAN, 45 years and counting, powered by cable.
C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, brings you a recap of the day's most important events. Find out what happened on Capitol Hill, the White House, and with policymakers, all delivered straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at cspan.org/connect.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. The White House says President Joe Biden will travel to Florida on Sunday to survey damage from Hurricane Milton, which has killed over a dozen people, caused widespread damage to property, left millions without electricity, and flooded many areas. President Biden today got another briefing on the federal government's response to both Hurricanes Milton and Helene from cabinet secretaries, Homeland Security advisors, the FEMA administrator, and a representative of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They were all in the Roosevelt Room at the White House.
Well, folks, Kamala and I have just received a briefing from senior leaders across our administration from Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton. And to state the obvious, I'm sure you feel the same way, our heart goes out to all those folks who've lost not only personal property, but their homes, and some lost lives. And grieving after the aftermath of the tornadoes, brutal winds, record downpours, and historic flooding. I must have spoken in the last 3 days to 50 to 75 members from North Carolina all the way down to Florida, talking to mayors and county executives. And anyway, it's amazing what's going on. And this is the third major storm to hit Florida in 3 months. And experts estimate that, and it's early estimates, it could be more, it could be less, but estimate that it's caused damages around $50 billion from Hurricane Milton alone. Just alone, $50 billion. I want everyone in the impacted areas to know we're going to do everything we can to help you pick back up the pieces and get back to where you were. We've been in constant contact, calling and reaching out to over 40 state and local officials, as I said, and we have to give them a little bit of hope. I mean, some of you have been through crises. You know, the one thing you wonder about when things are really bad is there hope? Is anybody coming? Is it going to happen? And that's what's happening right now. State and local officials are doing everything they can to help these folks recover.
President Biden at the White House at today's hurricane response briefing. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, joined the meeting remotely.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to all of the men and women represented at the agencies that are represented by the members of the President's Cabinet for the work that they've been doing around the clock. In the wake of Hurricane Milton, we have, of course, witnessed widespread devastation. Homes and neighborhoods have been severely damaged. Millions of people are without power and thousands without clean water. To the people of Florida, and you must know, and to all of those in the region, our nation is with you. We see your incredible strength and resilience, and we are working around the clock to keep you safe. We continue to coordinate resources with local and state authorities, including food, water, medical supplies, and generators, and we will continue to work with the teams on the ground to restore water and power as quickly as possible. In the coming days and weeks, President Biden and I will make sure that the communities that are there on the ground and have been affected will have the resources they need, not only to respond to the storm, but also to recover. And we will continue to keep communities in Florida, Georgia, North and South Carolina, and across the Southeast ensured that they will recover from Hurricane Helene. Finally, I will say once again, as Secretary Mayorkas and I have discussed, to any company or individual that is using this crisis to jack up prices through illegal fraud or price gouging, whether it be at the gas pump, the airport, or the hotel counter, we will be monitoring and there will be a consequence. The bottom line is this: we are in this for the long haul, and the support and the coordination between the federal, state, and local authorities and leaders has been extraordinary and will continue for as long as it takes. I thank you all.
Vice President Kamala Harris, Democratic presidential nominee, calling into today's White House briefing with President Biden on the response to Hurricanes Milton and Helene. An ABC News article says that President Biden Friday said he believes his administration is breaking through with the truth when it comes to misinformation surrounding the federal response to the hurricanes, though Biden also continued his vocal criticism of former President Donald Trump, who he said was not singularly to blame for the proliferation of false claims in recent weeks, but, quote, has the biggest mouth. This morning, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis held a hurricane response news conference in St. Petersburg, Florida.
We started this weekend with emergency debris operations. We demanded 24/7 landfill access, and we took all of our trucks that are involved for the Florida Department of Transportation. They're building roads. They're doing normal work that they're supposed to do. That was paused. All those resources were surged, mostly to Pinellas, but also to the barrier islands of Manatee and Sarasota. And in about a 72-hour period, our state guys were able to do 2,200 truckloads of debris from Pinellas County barrier islands. And that's over 40,000 cubic yards of debris that was removed. And I don't think there's ever been that much debris removed in such a short period of time. So I want to thank those folks from those state agencies. We also had some of our road contractors who, because the storm was coming, they were probably going to have to stop road building anyways. And so we transitioned them to help with the debris. So it was really a team effort. But those guys we had shifts working round the clock. And you had in the wee hours of the morning, as Milton was expected to make landfall later that day, you still had this debris operation going. So that made a huge difference, and it definitely mitigated some of the damages. We also immediately started doing cut and toss operations as soon as it was safe. 12,000 miles of state roads have been cleared, and that's 96% complete. And in less than 12 hours, 158 bridge inspectors have conducted nearly 2,000 bridge inspections across the impacted areas. I-4, I-75, I-95, and Alligator Alley are cleared and open. Sunshine Skyway, Gandy, Howard Franklin, Courtney Campbell have been inspected, cleared, and are open. Commercial airports, Daytona, Lakeland, Melbourne, Orlando, Sanford, Palm Beach, Punta Gorda, Southwest Florida, Tampa International, and Vero Beach are all open. Sarasota, Bradenton is expected to reopen at 0600 tomorrow. And St. Pete Clearwater Airport is expected to resume today at 1600. We are helping them with pumps to send so that they're able to get up online later this afternoon.
Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican of Florida, this morning in St. Petersburg, part of an extensive briefing where he touched on many issues, including power outages and the search and rescue operations. Story from the Miami Herald about the news conference reads, standing in front of the crumbled wreckage of a downtown high-rise smashed by a fallen crane, Governor Ron DeSantis said the developer responsible should have used more common sense to take down heavy equipment before Hurricane Milton arrived. Reporter asked whether there should be more government regulation of cranes during extreme weather. DeSantis said, "I mean, do we have to regulate everything?" adding that he thought taking cranes down during storms was standard practice. That was from the Miami Herald. On Wall Street today, the Dow up 409, Nasdaq up 60, S&P up 34. Story from Reuters. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Friday there was deep concern in Asia about the prospect of conflict spreading in the Middle East, as the UN chief called for everything possible to be done to avoid an all-out war in Lebanon. The conflict in the Middle East was a central issue during Friday's East Asia Summit in Laos, where Blinken said Washington was dedicated to using diplomacy to try to control the situation in the face of what he called an Iranian-led axis of resistance. The U.S. has stressed to Israel the importance of meeting the humanitarian needs of people in Gaza, Blinken said, adding it was in Israel's interest that people forced from their homes by hostilities in Lebanon are able to return. That was the reporting from Reuters. During his news conference in Laos, Secretary Blinken was asked about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying this week in a video address to the people of Lebanon, "You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza. It doesn't have to be this way."
When the horror of October 7th happened, the next day, Hezbollah joined in, trying to create another front. In the process, the rockets and other munitions that they were launching into northern Israel forced people to flee from their homes. And some 70,000 Israelis have had to leave their homes. Similarly, in southern Lebanon, because Israel responded to these attacks from Hezbollah, you have many people who had to leave their homes. This is well before the last few weeks. This is what happened over the last year. And we all have a strong interest in trying to help create an environment in which people can go back to their homes and live there safely and securely, and kids can go back to school. So Israel has a clear and very legitimate interest in doing that. The people of Lebanon want the same thing. We believe that the best way to get there is through a diplomatic understanding, one that we've been working on for some time and one that we're extremely focused on right now. Now, Israel has a right to defend itself against terror attacks coming from Hezbollah, from Hamas, from anyone else. But it's also vitally important that in doing that, they focus on making sure that civilians are protected and, again, are not being caught in a terrible crossfire. So that's another area of concern. When it comes to Lebanon's future, this is for the Lebanese people to decide, not for anyone else, not for any outside actor, whether it's the United States, Israel, or any of the many actors in the region. But it's clear that the people of Lebanon have an interest, a strong interest, in the state asserting itself and taking responsibility for the country and its future. The presidency has been vacant for 2 years now, and for the Lebanese people, having a head of state would be very important. But that's for the Lebanese to decide, and no one else.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at a news conference in Laos at the close of the annual summit of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, which includes the United States, India, China, Japan, Russia, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, also joined by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. More from the Reuters article about the news conference. Friday's discussions at ASEAN included the war in Ukraine, Myanmar civil war, climate change, tensions in the Taiwan Strait, and concern about confrontations in the South China Sea, a key conduit for at least $3 trillion in annual shipborne trade. The 2024 Nobel Peace Prize was awarded today to a Japanese organization representing survivors of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II in 1945 for their efforts to, quote, achieve a world free of nuclear weapons. Jørgen Vatne-Friednes, chair of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, made the announcement in Oslo.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Peace Prize for 2024 to the Japanese organization Nihon Hidankyo. This grassroots movement of atomic bomb survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, also known as Hibakusha, is receiving the Peace Prize for its efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons and for demonstrating through witness testimony that nuclear weapons must never be used again. In response to the atomic bombs attacks of August 1945, a global movement arose whose members have worked tirelessly to raise awareness about the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of using nuclear weapons. Gradually, a powerful international norm developed, stigmatizing the use of nuclear weapons as morally unacceptable. This norm has become known as the nuclear taboo. The testimony of the Hibakusha, the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, is unique in this larger context. These historical witnesses have helped to generate and consolidate widespread opposition to nuclear weapons around the world by drawing on personal stories, creating educational campaigns based on their own experience, and issuing urgent warnings against the spread and use of nuclear weapons. The Hibakusha helps us describe the indescribable, to think the unthinkable, and to grasp the incomprehensible pain and suffering caused by nuclear weapons. The Norwegian Nobel Committee wishes nevertheless to acknowledge one encouraging fact. No nuclear weapons have been used in war in nearly 80 years. The extraordinary efforts of Nihon Hidankyo and other representatives of the Hibakusha have contributed greatly to the establishment of the nuclear taboo. It is therefore alarming that today this taboo against the use of nuclear weapon is under pressure. The nuclear powers are modernizing and upgrading their arsenals. New countries appear to be preparing to acquire nuclear weapons, and threats are being made to use nuclear weapons as part of ongoing warfare.
Jürgen Watne-Friednes is chair of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, making the announcement in Oslo today of the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, which has been awarded since 1901. The Nobel Committee says that this year there were 286 nominees, 197 individuals, and 89 organizations, although the committee also says that the identity of the nominees is kept secret for 50 years. And finally, on Washington Today, a Campaign 2024 nugget where you might learn something about a candidate you didn't know before. Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, the Republican vice presidential nominee, Thursday at a town hall in Greensboro, North Carolina, moderated by former race car driver Danica Patrick, spoke about his skills in the kitchen.
I think you could share maybe what you did with your day off that you had a couple days ago and what your special secret skill is with the American people.
All right, well.
And be specific.
Okay, I will. Okay. Well, I was raised in a middle-class family, and so... That's the Kamala Harris answer to any question. So...
You forgot to laugh.
You
forgot to laugh.
Right. Yeah, I forgot the awkward cackle afterwards. But okay. So I had half a day off on the campaign trail the other day, and because we're kind of in crunch time, so you don't really get much time off. But you'd probably be shocked to know this, that I'm a big baker. Like I really, I can. Yeah, there's some bakers out there. So my 4-year-old and I, he's like my sous chef when we're baking. So we made, because I was going to, because my wife and I were on the road for a couple days. The kids are at home right now with my aunt and uncle, and then we get back late tonight. So I made them breakfast treats for 3 days in a row. And so for the first day, they had homemade cinnamon rolls. The second day, they had dulce de leche rolls. And the third day, they had chocolate chip scones. So we did all that together. And, I'm not perfect, but I do have the talent of baking. So that's one thing I got going for me.
Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, Republican vice presidential nominee, Thursday night at a town hall in Greensboro, North Carolina, moderated by former race car driver Danica Patrick. Politico had an article back in August on Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, titled 55 Things to Know About Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's pick for VP. And one of them was he's a self-proclaimed sci-fi fantasy guy when it comes to books. He said, I just finished reading the 4-book series Mortal Engines. I read a lot of these young adult ones because I do it with my kids. I was reading that one with Gus, he said in 2019. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. You can sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.